If you lived your whole life under the control of apocalyptic overlords, what would you do? This train is full of terrifying secrets, and death is lying around every corner. I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the death train in Snowpiercer. These passengers are going to regret rebelling. A guard begins taking stock of the passengers in this train car where all the poor people live, and everyone begins to sit down except for Curtis here. He's dead set on escaping this place, and is focused on counting how many gates there are in the train cars ahead before joining his friend on the floor. Edgar here scolds him for not following orders, while the soldiers asks for experienced violinists to raise their hands. They're needed to entertain the rich passengers at the front, but they have no idea that soon, the whole train is going to become a battleground. In 2014, a chemical compound called CW7 was used to cool down the planet to bring down global temperatures, but something went wrong. The chemical was too effective and sent the world into an ice age that rendered all life on the planet extinct. The last remaining humans boarded a massive train called the Snowpiercer that's been circling the world for the past 17 years. That's when this old couple walks up to a guard, informing him that they're both trained violinists, showing off their hands as proof. The guards accept only one of them as an authorized passenger, but the old man insists that he won't go without his wife and walks away. Suddenly, the guard follows them, hitting the man's partner, while everyone is forced to sit down and watch their punishment. Later, Curtis moves to another train car where he cuts open a protein bar, discovering a secret message hidden inside by an informant, and talks to this old man Gilliam. They discover that there's a security expert named Namgung Min-soo who's being kept in the prison section of the train, and together they plan how they'll break him out. Curtis reveals that there is a period of 4 seconds where all 3 locked gates are opened at the same time, and that's their opportunity to enter the prison section. The security expert should be able to get them to the front of the train, and Curtis discusses his plan to overtake the train driver so Gilliam can fairly rule over the Snowpiercer. But the old man disagrees, mentioning that his time has already passed. Later, the guards arrive at the living quarters, announcing that they need to undertake a medical inspection with only the children. Once they've been gathered, this woman comes in to take measurements of their bodies, but then she notices someone shuffling suspiciously in the crowd. Walking over to Tim's mother, she checks under her dress, suspecting that she's hiding a kid, and finds no one underneath. Suddenly, the mom signals for her son to run, but the guards quickly chase after him, shoving the mother out of the way as they catch up. The others can do nothing except watch as the boy is carried away out of the poor people's train carriage along with another child. The kid's father freaks out, rushing past the soldiers to throw a shoe at the woman's face, but that was his biggest mistake. The man is captured and stripped of his shirt as another passenger sets a timer hanging it on the man's neck before shoving his arm through a hole in the train wall. It's a brutal punishment, and the woman takes the man's shoe to place on his head, declaring that their behavior is unacceptable. She makes it known to everyone that those in front of the train are the higher-ups, and those at the tail are simple passengers who aren't allowed to rebel, or else they'll face the worst punishments imaginable. Okay, so these people are living in a post-apocalyptic dystopia. The conditions outside are completely uninhabitable, and the only people alive are the passengers of this train. The population has been divided up into different classes by compartment, and those in the back of the train are living in an actual nightmare. The higher-ups in the train have come to take their children away for a mysterious reason, and they'll never see them again. This is absolutely terrifying, but there's something that Curtis and the other passengers can do to try to keep the children safe during these routine checkups. Tim here hides under his mother's skirt during the checkup, and it's safe to assume that even if he wasn't under her skirt and hiding somewhere else, the higher-ups would search the compartment and eventually find him, which means that hiding anywhere else besides under her skirt isn't a great option. Acting out against the military men protecting the higher-up without planning ahead wouldn't work either, since the military men are armed with protective gear and assault rifles. If it were me, rather than try to hide the kids, I would work with the rest of the compartment to over-ration their food to make them too big to be chosen. The higher-ups here come with a measuring tape to check the height and weight of the children, and from the looks of it, they're taking the smallest for some undetermined reason. The children that are taller and too old are ignored, which means that only certain children during a certain age in their lives are at risk. The passengers in the back compartment clearly know this, since they try to hide the children that they know are the right age and height. That means that this has happened before. Since there are only 2 children that really need to be protected, I would pull together our resources and make sure for the period in their lives that the children are at risk that they are overfed with these protein bars to make them bigger and less likely to fit the criteria. Since there are such limited resources, it might be difficult to bulk them up, but I would also use whatever I can find to put lifts in the children's shoes to make them look taller and add extra layers of clothing to make them look bulkier. If this isn't enough, I would make the children train in gymnastics day in and day out, so one is able to sit on top of the other. When the military men come, I would then throw a long coat over the two of them so they look like one much taller person and hide them amongst the crowd. With a little dirt on their faces, they could blend in more easily and would be more difficult to identify. That's when these two guys in suits pulled the father's frozen arm from outside the train and used a sledgehammer to smash it to bits. The old man Gilliam appears in the crowd and walks towards the front of the carriage, telling the woman that he needs to talk with the train's leader, Mr. Wilford, but she makes it clear that's impossible. Later, Edgar makes his final preparation to storm the security, rolling a barrel through the train while Curtis here bargains with this crazy man for 10 bars of something called chronal. He then meets up with the old man and suggests the guards don't have any bullets in their guns based on a comment the woman made earlier. He remembers they used up all their bullets in the last revolt, but Gilliam here disagrees with the idea, recommending that they wait for the next red letter to arrive. This could be their chance to successfully revolt, and the poor people began transporting this massive battering ram to the front when Tim's mom approaches Curtis, insisting that she needs to come along. The man refuses to let her, but suddenly, an alarm goes off and everyone begins to panic. The guards are coming ahead of schedule to conduct another head count, and they quickly hide all their weapons before the soldiers come in. With time of the essence, Edgar screams out for more food to distract the guards, but that's when one of them takes a passenger out of the crowd, threatening to kill him if they don't stop. Curtis realizes that it's now or never and charges to the front of the mob. He takes the guard's gun and tests the trigger, revealing there to be no bullets inside. The passengers charge forward with their battering ram, and Curtis jumps on as they rush through the train. They've blocked the gates from closing, and the passengers use the opportunity to take down the remaining guards. But as they're fighting in the prison section, they find their way blocked by this giant security guard. Swinging a metal block at the poor people, he never sees this man come running and quickly stab him in the heart. After taking his keys, Edgar uses it to unlock a compartment on the wall, revealing the security expert Nam to be lying unconscious inside. Curtis takes out this hallucinatory chemical chronal and waves it in front of the sleeping man. That's when he springs up, and Curtis questions if he designed the security systems on this train. The man refuses to comment, pointing to a device on the wall. Edgar hands it over, and Nam uses it as a translator to talk with them. Curtis explains that he needs the man's help, offering him 1 lump of chronal for every door that he opens. Hearing this, the man takes out a cigarette, lighting it in front of them while they look in shock, and flicks it into the crowd, starting a fight with the survivors. Curtis threatens the man for messing around before he unlocks another compartment to reveal his daughter, Yona, insisting that she needs to come along as well. Nam helps him with opening up the security door, and when the gate opens, the passengers rush inside, watching as this window opens up, seeing the outside world for the first time in years. Curtis interrupts the passengers to remind them that they're not here to sightsee. Nam here opens up the next door while they watch as this engineer jumps onto a wheel. The boys recognize him as a former passenger of their train car, but notice that something is wrong with the man. That's when they discover a large serving of protein blocks on the table below him and realize that he's been forced to produce food for the passengers. Suddenly, someone freaks out, and Curtis goes to investigate, but when he looks into the food processor, they find a disgusting sight. The protein bars they've been eating are being made from insects, and the man confronts the engineer, furious that he'd been feeding them bugs, when he notices a small container on the floor. It's the same kind of container used to send secret messages, and asks why he has this. The engineer reveals he's given them by the train staff and sends them into the protein bars. It's suspicious, and they show the message to the old man, who discovers it reads water. That makes Gilliam realize that if they take over the water supply section, they'll have power to overtake the train and get what they want. Later, Curtis talks to the daughter Yona, asking for her background on the train. She questions the man on what Earth was like, but he admits that he can't remember. That's when he asks the daughter how she knows what is behind every gate, and suspects she has psychic powers. The girl can't explain, so he asks her to predict what's in the next train car. She gets up to take a look and suddenly orders her father to keep the gate shut, but it's too late. The door opens up and they find a group of armed men standing in front of them. The masked men take up their weapons, and the passengers have no choice but to defend themselves. All hell breaks loose as Curtis here is forced to fight through the horde of men. Okay, this is even more terrifying. To Curtis's horror, these people have been eating mashed up cockroaches the entire time. The whole thing is completely disgusting, and Curtis is right to keep it from the rest of the group that this is actually what's inside of their protein bars. The group would freak out, and that would distract from the overall mission that they're trying to accomplish. But the meat grinding device that makes the bars could actually be useful to them now that they've come face to face with these axe-wielding men. The train itself is narrow, and the passengers from the back are trying to move forward. But because the axe-wielding men are trying to keep them from pushing past them, that limits the passengers to this little space to fight. The axe-wielding men are also more prepared with better weaponry and sustenance. The back of the train passengers are ill-equipped, and hand-to-hand combat is inevitable if they want to push forward. But if it were me, I would start to draw the Axemen back to their previous compartment and use the meat grinder as a way of killing them. This is a risky strategy, and the men have to focus on overpowering the Axemen first. But if they're able to get the upper hand at any point, it would be to their advantage to make sure that none of the men are able to get up again by grinding them after a fight. Now, this will only work if Nam is able to find a way to keep the doors open. We don't want to lose ground here, and jamming the door will allow passengers to use both compartments during the fight. Once the men have been disarmed and overpowered, they can be thrown into the meat grinder and killed. The other thing that the group is underutilizing here is Nam's daughter, Yona's clairvoyant abilities. At this point, the men don't know how far into the future that she can see, but rather than have her wait on the sidelines, the men should use her to predict the axe-wielding men's moves. The clairvoyant girl can't be everywhere at once, but by having her follow certain people like Curtis, it can help him carve through more of their enemies faster. The men should also create a system where, as soon as one of the axe-wielding men is killed, the axes are redistributed to those that are least skilled in fighting. That way it helps maximize our fighting potential by making our weakest link stronger and our strongest fighter equipped with foresight. Curtis slips on the fish, nearly being struck by an axe before rolling out of danger, while Edgar here protects him from behind. Curtis continues walking towards the remaining men before the train conductor announces that they'll be reaching the Yekaterina Bridge. The masked men begin cheering, while Curtis here looks outside, realizing that they're about to hit a gigantic wall of ice. On impact, the entire train shakes, causing everyone to fall down. That's when the conductor announces a second ice wall, and it nearly takes the train off of its tracks. The vehicle continues through the rocky path, reaching its end, and the conductor informs them that the train is now back on a safe route. The passengers stand up to continue their fighting, but then this woman returns to scold the poor people for causing a scene in front of the water supply room. And for their lack of gratitude, she reveals 74% of the passengers will be killed as punishment. The masked men put on night vision goggles, and the lights turn off, with Yona here mentioning that they're about to head through a long tunnel. Curtis orders everyone to move back as the passengers are forced to fight in the dark. With no way to see their enemy, the poor people are brutally killed one by one. Curtis here calls out for a fire to light the train, and this little boy is sent out, taking a flaming torch through the living quarters, which is passed on to the other survivors. A bunch of poor people run into the train section with flaming torches, and one of them is tossed into the room as the passengers begin to fight back. This shirtless man runs to the front, signaling to the train worker that he'll be killed if they don't surrender, and the conductor tries to get his men to stop fighting, but no one cares. After killing him, the passenger runs through the remaining men and throws his knife at the woman, hitting her straight in the leg. Curtis looks back to see her being dragged into the next train section, but then hears his friend calling for help. The man sees Edgar has been taken hostage and makes the decision to chase after the woman, letting his friend be sacrificed for the greater good. He quickly runs over to the train official and takes her prisoner, forcing her to stop the men from fighting. He walks through the crowd of dead passengers, but that's when this man comes rushing forward, and he's stopped at the last second by Yona here, who kills him using a metal spear. With the situation contained, Gilliam walks to the front and orders everyone to wash themselves in the bloodshed in the water supply section. Okay, Curtis and the other passengers have made it to the water supply, which is a crucial resource for the train's operation. The fight was bloody and the rebel passengers lost a lot of their ranks. This is only the beginning if they want to make it to the engine, and there's bound to be more bloodshed and fighting on the way there. However, the passengers can strategize here and save some of their lives now that they have the train's water supply within their control. This woman is the passenger's hostage, and she has a direct line of communication with the front of the train. The best case scenario in this situation is collecting enough water for the rebels and passengers in the back of the train, while the rebels poison the water supply for the front of the train. The only problem with this plan is that the water supply in this room is only used for those in the back half of the train, and poisoning it from the protein bar room would be essentially useless. Since the front of the train gets their water from a different source, they would only be hurting their own people if they tried to block off access to the water supply. That means that the passengers will have to get creative to take advantage of the resources they've gained in these train carriages. In the protein bar room, there are hordes of cockroaches that are ground up and used for the back of the train's food. Rather than grinding them up, I would collect hordes of these cockroaches and bring them into the front carriage when I get there. By releasing hundreds of cockroaches amongst the front of the train passengers, it will create disorder and chaos during the fight, and will make it harder for Wilford's men to pinpoint me as the rest of the carriage panics. Water isn't typically used as a form of weaponry except for certain torture tactics, but since the resources are so limited, the rebels should attempt to freeze some of the water into blocks of ice to use later while they're fighting. They can then use these blocks like blunt objects to knock Wilford's men unconscious, like a brutal and fatal snowball fight. Freezing the ice ball shouldn't be hard either, since just outside their window is freezing temperatures, able to freeze a man's arm off. The passengers are also still not utilizing Yona's clairvoyant abilities. They should try to sit with her and run by several options and plans to see how they pan out in order to use the best strategy necessary moving forward. It's possible she's able to see multiple realities if we stand near the door of the water room train and consider entering it. If she sees gruesome deaths in our future, then we'll hold off and strategize until we can come up with a better plan for attack. Later, the poor people interrogate the train official on the missing children and threaten to cut her limbs off if she doesn't comply. Terrified, the woman confesses that Wilford might know where the children are. Curtis urges her to call the man now, or else they'll shut the water supply off and force him to come. The lady mocks him, pointing out that his plan won't work and that he failed to save his friend. Furious, the man freaks out and threatens to kill her. She insists the leader won't come to help her even if the water supply is stopped, offering to help him find a safe passage to his location. Later, Gilliam questions if Curtis here wants to keep going, mentioning that this is the farthest anyone has made it through the train. Curtis insists that they'll keep going, but the old man informs him that the passengers are beginning to lose hope, with so many already dead. Curtis tells him that he'll go alone while the old man takes care of the wounded until he reaches the front of the train. Gilliam gets up and reluctantly agrees to this plan, informing him that Wilford is behind a big gate with a W sign, but warns him to not let the man talk even if that means cutting off his tongue. The next day, Curtis and the other appointed members get ready to travel through the next set of trains, while the old man tells the scruffy kid Gray here to join them. Opening up another gate, they follow the train official into a greenhouse as she orders all of her workers to keep calm and get back to work. The group follows her into an aquarium-themed room where the train official offers them sushi. They sit down at the counter, but then Curtis here pulls out a protein bar, ordering the woman to take a bite. She leads them into a classroom where Tim's mother looks for her son, hoping he's here along with the other stolen child, but he's not there. Desperate, the parents take out drawings of their kids and asks if anyone has seen them. This boy raises his hand, mentioning that they were taken further up the train. That's when the teacher informs them that they're about to watch a video about Wilford, turning this TV on to show a documentary based on the leader's love of automotives. It explains that he planned to create a circular railway that extended for 438,000 kilometers, which completes a full circle around the globe each year. The teacher then calls her students over to look outside the window, explaining that they're about to see the Frozen 7, an event from 15 years ago where 7 passengers tried to escape from Wilford's train. She points outside to show how far they made it before being frozen alive. That's when the teacher announces that eggs will be given out to celebrate the new year, introducing this violinist who is going to play them a song. This man hands out a single egg to each person, but Curtis here realizes that there's a strange hole lying underneath. He opens up the egg and discovers a red note that only says the word blood. Okay, Curtis and his small crew of passengers have made their way into this room of children, with this creepy teacher who's obsessed with Wilford. All the children are being brainwashed into thinking that Wilford is a benevolent god, when in reality, he's using violence to keep the people in the back half of the train in line. Having said that, there's still something that this higher-up lady says that can help the rebel passengers force Wilford to come back and address them. While eating sushi, the higher-up lady explains the train operates on balance. Even though they have plenty of fish to eat, they only eat sushi twice a year, because everything on the train is managed based on maintaining balance in the ecosystem. Rather than continue to move forward right away, the passengers should take over the compartments that they already have control over and start disrupting Wilford's balance. By doing this, it will draw Wilford or his men to the back half of the train to address the issue if their resources become scarce. This is important because instead of pushing forward where there are unknown threats, it forces them to come to us where we can have booby traps and be prepared for when they attack. This gives us more of an upper hand instead of wandering into enemy territory unprepared and several men down. The other thing that can happen is that Wilford and the higher-ups could be lying about the amount of resources they actually have, and this could call into question the way Wilford runs the train. The children here have been brainwashed since birth to think of Wilford as an all-knowing godlike figure, and since the train has been running for 17 years, it means that many of the teenagers and young adults probably think the same thing about Wilford too. Some of them may question him now, but don't have the information to back up that he's a cruel and brutal leader. However, if we reveal that Wilford is actually stockpiling resources while the back half of the train starves, it may help wake up some of the brainwashed people further up the train. It's important to do this because having allies further out the train could help us later when the rebels do decide to move up towards the engine. There's strength in numbers, especially since the rebels are outweaponed. Even though there isn't a direct line of communication, gossip travels fast, and Curtis is already receiving messages from someone further up in these containers, so it's possible that regardless of if we make an effort to communicate with them, they will still hear that the rebels have overtaken several carriages. More people in the front will get word of what's happening in the back, especially if the resources we start taking from them affect their day-to-day life. The other thing that Curtis and the other passengers can do is fortify the carriages they've already gained control over. Although they have limited resources, the back half of the train has made do by being innovative and built upon what they already have. They can use the resources they have acquired in these new rooms and apply their imaginations to help build a wall between the freezer compartment and the children's compartment. The freezer compartment in particular looks like it has metal beams that can be used to build these walls. Arriving in the back train, the delivery man offers them boiled eggs and tells the passengers that he's got a surprise for them when suddenly he pulls out a gun, shooting the men down. Meanwhile, in the classroom, the teacher pulls out a submachine gun and kills the father of the missing child in front of the survivors. They hide behind the furniture as Gray here stands up and throws a blade into the teacher's neck. Curtis runs over to his hostage, who insists that this crap wasn't her doing, but that's when they see a terrifying broadcast of Gilliam being shot. Determined to take control of the Snowpiercer, the rebel executes his prisoner for revenge and orders the group to follow him. They walk through these luxury train rooms where all the upper-class passengers live and watch them go. Meanwhile, in the classroom, this train enforcer Franco finds the teacher's dead body lying on the ground and spots the rebels heading towards another section. He fires a shot through the window, forcing the group to find cover. Curtis fires a few shots in the man's direction and stops to reload at the same time as Franco. The passengers move out of cover and they both fire a shot at each other, but they miss. It's clear the man won't stop hunting them down, and he continues making his way through the train to finish the rebels off. Yona warns the group that the man is on their tail, and they hear him shooting from behind the gate. The survivors continue into the next train section before Franco catches up. Approaching the gate, he orders his men to unlock it and enters the sauna section of the train. They search for the poor people, and he fires a shot at a room. A front section passenger falls out, and one of the guards insists he needs to be arrested, but the man quickly shoots him. It's cold-blooded, and he's got no idea this is a trap. Gray kills the other guard and throws a knife into the man's back, while Curtis here pops out of hiding, trying to aim for the right person. Franco knocks his attacker out before Tim's mother runs at him, but that was her biggest mistake. He blocks her and shoots her in the chest. Seizing his opportunity, Curtis attacks the man but quickly gets overpowered and knocked down on the floor. Franco is about to kill him, but the other rebel stops at the last second. Frustrated, the train enforcer fights him off before pushing him against a wall and stabbing the man in the chest. Franco tidies himself up, grabbing a sword from the floor, and searches for the remaining rebels. Opening up another door, he finds this woman silently bathing. He moves her out of the way to reveal the daughter hiding behind the passenger, but then Nam stands up and attacks Franco. He manages to knock him to the floor and starts strangling him. Suddenly, Curtis here wakes up, jamming a sword into the man's side and putting him down, with no idea it didn't kill him. Okay, things have gotten brutally violent here, and the only people that are left alive are Curtis, Nam, and Yona. Keeping Nam alive is necessary for Curtis's overall mission, and if anything happens to Yona, Nam could be essentially useless because she's already out of it. Pushing ahead and using violence has been the only way to get ahead here, and things are bound to get risky again. The only problem is that Curtis is even more outmanned and outnumbered if Wilford has more cronies right around the corner, and Nam is the only other person that has some fighting abilities. The men have guns that they can now use, so if it were me, I would take the rest of the passengers hostage to force Wilford to come to us. At this point, our options are extremely limited. Going outside is a freezing cold alternative that could immediately kill us, and pushing ahead has unknown risks with a skeleton crew of rebels. However, what we know so far about all of the people in the train cars is that they are living lives of luxury and are comfortable. Now that we have guns, regardless of if they have bullets left, it would be easy to scare them and force them to listen to our every order. Anyone that's left behind us that has been sent by Wilford has already been killed, so we don't risk this threat. There are also other passengers from the back of the train that are still living in squalor. Even though the strongest pushed ahead to take control of the train, if we give them the guns left over from the dead assassins we killed, then they could help maintain order over the train. This is also an interesting opportunity to start working with and creating alliances with some of the front of the carriage passengers, because after Curtis kills Wilford, he still has to figure out what to do with them. Sure, he could kill them all, but how is he going to run the train if none of the passengers in the back know how it works? Doing this now would create much less bloodshed and may reveal more strategic ways to take control over the engine. Once Curtis has all of the passengers corralled in one location, we could ask who is familiar with how the engine runs. Nam here has been useful to us because he's familiar with the security system and unlocking doors, but his knowledge is limited to this area of expertise. Some of these passengers could serve important roles in the train's overall function, which would help us stop the train and force Wilford to come out and confront us. There's also possibly passengers that are disgruntled with the way Wilford runs things, or are willing to sell him out for the chance to live. By strategizing here for what will happen after we kill Wilford, we may be able to gain more allies that can help us overtake him in a less risky and more efficient way. That's when Curtis checks on Tim's dying mother and takes out the drawing of her son, promising to find the boy as she dies in front of them. The group continues through the train and enter this nightclub section where Curtis storms through the crowd of drunk partygoers. Walking through this boiler room, Curtis reaches the gate that Gilliam spoke of, where Wilford is waiting. He orders Nam to open the door, throwing all of his chrono at the man, and bangs on the gate in frustration. Nam manages to push him off and sits Curtis down before offering him his final cigarette. The rebel questions him on the tail section, asking if he knows what happened when they first boarded. Curtis Curtis explains that they were taken away and placed in the back of the train without food or water. They were forced to eat other passengers after a month, and Curtis here breaks down, admitting that he had no option but to join. He continues by explaining a story where a woman was hiding with her baby. She was killed and the newborn was taken away, but an old man interrupted to offer up his own arm in place of the child. Curtis reveals that the baby was Edgar, and he was one of the men responsible for murdering his mother. Tearing up, Curtis explains that he's now waited 18 years to confront the leader and begs Nam to open the final gate. That's when the security expert points to another door and reveals that it's been frozen shut for years, but offers him another plan of escape if they can manage to get it open. Curtis questions how they would survive without freezing, but Nam explains that he saw a crashed frozen airplane while passing by the Yekaterina Bridge. He's taken a look at it every new year, noticing the vehicle has slowly been unfreezing itself over the course of 10 years. He explains that the snow is melting and it's a sign there might be a livable environment outside. Curtis tells him to lay off the chrono, insisting that it's making him come up with crazy theories, but the man reveals he has a genius plan. The chrono rocks he's been asking for is a highly flammable material, and it can be used to create a makeshift bomb. Explaining he's gathered enough to create an explosive brick. He plants it into the side door and demands his matches back, but Curtis refuses. Suddenly, the gate opens and this woman shoots him. As he collapses in pain, she invites Curtis to a dinner on behalf of Wilford and takes him past the gate into the engine room. Okay, Curtis here has been welcomed to finally meet Wilford and confront him face to face. He's finally getting what he wants, and it seems like this is the perfect opportunity for him to kill Wilford. However, there are a couple things weird about this situation that Curtis should be aware of going into his dinner. The first is that although Curtis is starving, he shouldn't eat any of the food that Wilford gives him. This is a quick and easy way for him to be killed without anyone having to get their hands dirty, and this would be an incredibly stupid way for Curtis to die after having killed and fought his way to the front. The other thing is that Curtis should probably change his objective from killing Wilford to escaping the train through this side door. As counterintuitive as that might seem, Nam has just revealed a crucial piece of information in telling Curtis that he thinks the snow outside is melting. Although he could be wrong and Curtis could be killed if he escapes, the idea that Nam is right is further reinforced by him being immediately shot after saying this. Nam not only provides Curtis with an example of why he thinks his theory is true, but he also gives him the solution to escaping. Prior to this, Nam and Curtis were sitting outside of Wilford's headquarters, and it wasn't until Curtis was given this opportunity that Wilford chose to have dinner with him. Wilford is potentially trying to pacify Curtis here now that he knows that there's another option than staying on the train. The other reason that escaping is a good option is because Curtis literally has no plans on how to handle the train after he kills Wilford. All of his strongest and smartest allies in the rebellion are dead, and there are tons of other passengers in the front carriages that he will either have to create alliances with and kill. Unless he has a good plan for how to lead the train, it's possible that the front carriage passengers will revolt against him after Wilford is dead because he doesn't have a plan and their lives will be significantly worse. Curtis should find a way to stop the train first and then blow open the door with Chrono and free his people. This way they can get off and try to make a new society outside of Wilford's control. The best way to do this would be to take Wilford hostage first while Curtis collects resources and then blow up the train door so they're not totally unequipped to restart their lives. Yona is also the last person left alive except for Curtis. She'll be able to tell him before moving ahead with this plan whether or not it will work using her clairvoyant abilities. Wilford welcomes Curtis, offering up food, and congratulates him on being the first person to ever walk his train from start to finish. The rebel insults the engineer for never visiting the tail section and questions how he can live like this knowing that passengers are suffering. Wilford explains that everyone has a purpose in order to maintain balance in the train, insisting that they needed a system to replace natural selection. He compliments the man on his use of torches midway through the train, commenting that he and Gilliam didn't plan for Curtis to get this far. Shocked, the rebel questions what Wilford means and is told that the old man had been secretly working with the train engineer. The insurgency was meant to end a Yekaterina tunnel, and the surviving passengers were to be sent back with much more room than they had before. Gilliam was punished for causing too many deaths in the front section, and the train engineer calls his assistant to tally up the tail section numbers. The man confirms that 74% of the passengers have been purged, but Wilford insists he spare 18% and turns the phone to Curtis as he hears gunshots ring through. Furious, the rebel slams his fist on the table, and the woman fires a shot off before the train engineer scolds her to be careful of the engine. There's nothing that Curtis can do to help, and Wilford continues to lecture him while cleaning the machine, reinforcing the need to have a revolt inside the train. He then offers to show Curtis something amazing and brings him closer to the engine. Outside the room, the girl wakes up and notices her dad is bleeding. He's about to explain his plan to get the chrono, but notices a passenger is about to attack her and fights him off, knocking the man down into the gears. The security expert realizes that the other front-end passengers have gathered to kill them and tells his daughter to get the gate open. It's the only way they can get the chrono and use it to blow open a hole to the outside world. Meanwhile, Wilford asks the rebel when was the last time he'd been alone on this train and gives him time to collect his thoughts. Curtis looks at the engine, breaking down into tears as he experiences silence for the first time in years, and collapses. That's when he's given a personal message, and he opens up to discover a red letter with the word train on it. Wilford explains that he wants the rebel to take over and keep his engine going, ensuring that what's left of humanity stays alive. That's when Yona manages to get the gate open, and the engineer's assistant goes outside to see who it is, but gets killed from behind by the daughter. She quickly searches the dead body for the chronal, as Curtis watches her father fight off an impending horde. The engineer tells him that it's his destiny to take over the train, convincing him to give up on everyone he fought for just as Yona runs up to him. She begs for the match, but he pushes her away. Horrified, the girl backs off and uses her psychic powers, detecting someone is underneath the floor. She quickly starts to remove a tile, and Curtis helps her when they discover something horrifying. The kidnapped child Tim is working inside and making sure the train is operating. Wilford then reveals that since the parts for the engine have been wearing out, he's had to take the poor people's children who are small enough to fit in the spaces below and use them as living train parts. It makes Curtis furious and he knocks the man out, determined to rescue Tim. With no time to waste, he shoves his arm through a spoke and stops the gears before giving the girl the matchbox. She quickly leaves the room and runs outside to ignite the improvised bomb. Suddenly, Curtis spots the other kidnapped boy Andy walking out from a cupboard and begs him to stop walking towards the engine, but it's useless. The kid has been brainwashed and he climbs into the machine as Wilford wakes up, explaining the child has accepted his position in the train. Meanwhile, Nam and his daughter set off the makeshift bomb just as Curtis saves the trapped child, but loses his arm in the process. The security expert tries to shut the gate to protect them, but it won't budge. With time running out, he rushes into the room and hugs his daughter to keep her safe, just as the bomb goes off. The massive explosion rips apart the carriage, causing an avalanche that sends the train crashing into a tunnel and off the rails. Later, Yona and the rescued child wakes up with no sign of anyone else alive. She takes her first step outside, finally realizing that the climate is barely inhabitable. That's when the last survivors of the train spot this polar bear in the wilderness, and now know that they're going to eat some real meat.
But what do you think? How would you beat Snowpiercer? Let me know with a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, leave a like and subscribe, and check out the How to Beat playlist for more videos like this. Until next time, have a damn good day.